So we are back today. Just a quick recap of the last video, just in case if you haven't seen it. We talked about the judging polarities, which are also known as the decision-making polarities, and that's pretty much FETI, which is concerned with being on the same page. And we talked about how those look like when they're working together, because they're not always in opposition, especially when they're healthy and integrated, as well as TEFI, which is often talking about like motivation and then execution of the plan to be able to receive what you want, and not betraying yourself in the process. And so if you don't know what any of that is, then make sure to go and refer back to those videos. And if you don't even know what the functions are, then make sure and refer back to the videos that I've made previously. You can find it all in my playlist, Cognitive Functions 101, but this is now Cognitive Functions 201, where we are talking about polarity. So how each of the functions, the ones that come together, how they can be integrated and how they work together when they're put together. So today we're going to be talking about the perceiving functions. So these are NISE and NESI, also known as Introverted Intuition and Extroverted Sensing, which always come together, and then Extroverted Intuition and Introverted Sensing, which always comes together. So we're going to start off actually with Extroverted Intuition and Introverted Sensing. What I would say about this combination is that Introverted Sensing is very concerned with what is reliable. So that means that it's very concerned with consistency. SI, we usually put pattern recognition with intuitive functions, but when it comes to SI, this is also a pattern recognition in itself, because it's noticing what has always worked, what is reliable, and so SI, Heidi Priebe once defined it or described it as like the old man, and I might not, I think I've embellished this on my own, but you'll get the concept. Like, she described it as like the old man that's sitting down and watches people cross a river, using the stepping stones, and he sees which stepping stones are the most reliable. He sees this happen over and over and over and over again until he knows exactly which stepping stones are reliable, and then maybe, he also knows like which ones you can venture off of the correct or reliable path in order to do. And then Extroverted Intuition is more of the, man, forget the stepping stones. Let's try something new. How about that vine over there? Let's swing across, and that could be a little bit dangerous for the SI user, because the SI user, as in higher stacked SI user, is like, whoa, that's not reliable. Why would you want to try that? But the higher NE user, which means that their SI is lower, is like, yeah, I know, that's the fun in this. And now if we do try it out, and we do try it out enough times, then we'll be able to see that it's more reliable, and then it's going to be integrated into the SI. See how that works? It connects. And sooner or later, the new tradition, or the new safe or most reliable way of doing things, now becomes bored to the NE user, and now they find something else aside from the vine, whereas the vine now becomes the new stepping stones. You get what I'm saying over here? And so another way to describe this is kind of like when you have, we always talk about SFJs and they're baking cookies and stuff like that. So the reason why we always relate SI, Introverted Sensing, to tradition is because we look at how, for example, the SFJs, they will have like cookies, they'll bake cookies for a Christmas one year. And when they receive the feedback that, everyone really loved these cookies, everyone love this specific recipe and all of that, they're like, whoa, especially as also FE users, they're like, oh my goodness, this worked, this made everyone happy, this created some type of harmony. Next year, I'm gonna make the same exact cookies, because why would I do something different, or why would I not do this? This worked. And that's what SI is trying to do. It's trying to look for like what is reliable. So it's going to try and keep on consistently doing this. Now, introverted, so then it becomes a tradition, but Extroverted Intuition, also being the other half, or the flip coin of SI, is going to come in, and it's going to be like, okay, they liked this recipe, and that's great. How about we add a little bit of spice to it? maybe actually literal spice. Like, let's add some pumpkin spice to the recipe this year. Let's see how that goes. Now, the higher SI stacked user might be like, no, that's a little bit too adventurous. But if they don't like it, we should just stick to the recipe. Kind of like from Ratatouille, that chick, I forgot her name at the moment, but you know who I'm talking about. She was kind of strict. I believe that she was an ISTJ, and I believe that Remy the rat was an ENFP. So they were dealing with some very high SI from the ISTJ, and then high NE from the rat ENFP. And I think that Linguini was probably an ISFP or INFP. Not sure. Probably ISFP though. I think that that stick to the recipe is like a very like SI kind of thing, which is a tradition. It's like, because this has always worked. You're tinkering with it. Why try to do something or improve something that's already been working properly? And that's why you also get the STJs who always stick to a certain system, and they're just like, yo, this system works. Let's just continue to use this system in that sense. But eventually you end up finding out that, okay, no, we need to use a different type of system, because this system, even though it might work, there are better systems out there. We can create a more improved system. We should ameliorate. And so in that same sense, the SI user, the higher SI user, when they're integrating NE, then they are still maybe baking the cookies, but they're allowing more exploration. And now maybe if they add that pumpkin spice next year, they probably might take baby steps instead of a whole leap. So they'll probably just add a little bit of pumpkin spice for the next year. It's like, oh, these are better than last year's cookies. Oh, awesome, cool. Now that has now become reliable. Let me just take it a little bit further, and they just keep on going like that. And that's how extroverted intuition works. It's like pushing and reinventing the wheel little by little. And the higher that the NE is, the more bigger of a leap they'll take. Maybe it won't just be pumpkin spice cookies, but maybe like if they're an NE Dom for something or something like that, then they're going to be like, oh, let me jump all the way over to making brownies instead of cookies, and it's still baking, but it's like in a whole different wheelhouse. And so that's, in my opinion, like, how extroverted intuition and introverted sensing might work out when they're integrated, but the way that they could be opposed to each other is if, that introverted sensing is like afraid of, trying new things because they're so used to how things have always been and how they always work. And so they don't want to be as adventurous. And then, the same sense in the reverse, extroverted intuition, like in order to be able to make novel things, you have to know how things were before. Because in order to better something, you have to know how it was before. So if you're like, running away from history and like understanding how things were in the past, then how are you going to be able to understand how to improve those things from the past and make a better future? So I think that that's a big thing that, NESI really brings to the table. It's hot. So next up is introverted intuition and extroverted sensing. These two always come together. This is why we call them a polarity. Now, the best way that I could pretty much describe this, I've already defined how introverted intuition works in the mind and everything, and pretty like a lot of videos, my metacognition video, and also just the cognitive functions 101 videos where I describe and redefine all of the functions. It's pretty much the sequence of your mind, thought A, thought B, all the way up to whatever thought G, H, Z, and then the subconscious retracing of those thoughts so that you can see the line between the thread that goes between all of these thoughts, and then you're able to predict other people's actions, other people's motives, whatever, see symbolism, all of that. So that's in essence what introverted intuition is, and that's how you get those underlying principles. And then extroverted sensing is anything having to do with, the body and being out in the external world, seeing things empirically for what they are without reading into it, which is why it's the flip of introverted intuition, because introverted intuition looks for the underlying meaning, while extroverted sensing doesn't look for that. It's looking for what can everybody empirically see and observe. And so this is the most factual function actually out of all of them. But then when you add in like, the judging functions and stuff like that, that's when some things can be like a little bit like different. Because then FI makes it become subjective if it's an SFP, or TI makes it become, even though it's about accuracy, you can be aiming for accuracy and you still be like messed up. Like just because it makes sense doesn't mean that it's right, And so When it comes to introverted intuition, another example on how I think that introverted intuition and extroverted sensing can work together is that story of the elephant, where there's 5 blind men feeling on an elephant, one blind man is feeling on the trunk, another blind man is feeling on the ears, all of that. And the way I describe this is that because they're all feeling on different parts of the elephant, but they don't know what exactly the animal is, it's not until they communicate with each other then they put the pieces together. And then it's like, oh my goodness, this is the elephant. So I would say that the extroverted sensing is them feeling on the elephant, feeling on the animal. But the introverted intuition does not pop up until they spend time alone in solitude. That's when they're able to connect the dots. That's when the blind men start to communicate. Hey, I got a trunk over here. It feels kind of like that. Oh, really? A trunk? I'm feeling a little bit of an ear. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm feeling some ivory tooth over here. Hey, guys, I think this is an elephant, and then boom, So the SE is the blind men feeling on the elephant or whatever, but they're not communicating, which means that when we are in SE mode, then we are not really like taking in a whole bunch of things. We're not allowing our mind to like form patterns and everything. We're instead just taking in all the sensory information and we're not reading into it. We're just taking it all in. But then the introverted intuition later on, once we're in solitude, is able to take things in and then connect dots, and then boom, now you know that there's an elephant involved. So you can see how these things can oppose each other a lot of times, because you'll have an introverted intuition user who's so into only being in solitude and not going out to engage with the world and get more information. And these are like the INJs who brag about like, how introverted they are and everything, not knowing that the more introverted you are, then the less we can rely on your intuition, because you're not getting outside feedback, which is only going to come from your SE, which is inferior. So you need to go out and really get involved more to be able to get in more of that information. And so when you have too much of that NI, then that means that you're not relying enough on that SE. So you're just redoing the same pattern over and over and over again, and you're not expanding your pool. The same thing with the higher SE users. They're just living life. They're living life. They have so much information. But this is why as they get older, then finally things start hitting them. And it's like, oh, shoot, you know what? I just had this insight or whatever, because now the blind men are starting to finally speak to each other. And it's like, oh, wow, that thing from 15 years ago, that was an elephant, But now they've had like so many experiences that they have to like sit back and really observe and everything. So the best thing to do is, if you're an SE NI user, really try to, if you value NI, like if NI is like higher for you, really try to make sure that you're getting enough SE time so that you'll be able to get in more patterns, get in more information for your NI to be able to handle. And if you're higher on the SE, make sure that you're getting a lot of NI time, solitude, so that you'll be able to connect a lot of these dots and your blind men can communicate and be able to understand things. Also, the thing with NI and SE is that NI creates a world within itself, So I believe that ENJs, for example, they create this world within themselves, but because they're extroverts, and extroverts are more prone to externalizing their energy to the outside world, I don't really ascribe to like all extroverts gain their energy from the outside world. But I do believe that all extroverts are more focused on the outside world, even if some of them may gain their energy from, being alone. And so because all extroverts, in my opinion, focus their energy on the external world, then they may build a lot in their internal world, but that'll become an ideal that they're going to try to project onto the external. So an ENJ will build this ideal, like Martin Luther King Jr., I have a dream, and then they'll try to externalize it into the external. And INJs will do this too, but they'll probably be less prone to put it out into the world, and they'll be more prone to just live into it in their own internal world, because introverts, their real world is their internal world, while for extroverts, their real world is the external world. So they're trying to make whatever's in here become out there, because that's where they actually live. Whereas for the introverts, they're just trying to like build everything in here, and then they're just trying to make it by on the outside world. In a nutshell, NI is building that world that you want to see, and then SE is like, okay, almost like with TE, but it's different. This is why ENTJs, because they have both the NI, SE, and the TE, like they really are good at like just putting the stuff out into that world. So when you have the NISE, the NI is creating that vision for what you want, for what you just not even like desire, because that sounds like more like FI, but like just the vision for like the dream that you have, that vision. And then the SE is like, okay, let's see the timing. Let's see how we're going to be able to like, act. When is the best time to act? When have you gotten the whole picture? And then how can you like go about going like through this? So it does get a little bit muddy, because judging functions do have to come and play a part. But at the end of the day, I feel like NISE plays a big part in like this vision casting kind of mindset. So I think that concludes the perceiving function polarities. And I just ran right through them. But let me know what you guys think. If you have any additional thoughts, be sure to leave them in the comments. If you have any questions, be sure to leave those in the comments. And yeah, let me also know if y'all have any other video ideas that y'all want me to put out. Thankfully, after this new laptop, then I've just been able to pump out a lot more. And yeah, I think that's about it. Hit me up if you need coaching and etc. Done.